right, so welcome, Allie. So today I'm here with the beautiful Allie Markotich, and we connected recently. Ava, your publicist, reached out. Somehow she discovered me, like from across the globe, and here we are connecting. It's so exciting.
It
And
is.
you have a really beautiful book that Ava sent to me as well, and I've just started reading it with my 4-year-old son. He
Oh,
just sits
good.
with me while I read it. And it's just the words, it's so beautiful. And I love how it just keeps coming back to the remembering. And it's
Mm,
just like this constant invitation, like, do you remember? Do you remember? Do you remember? And it's like, I can really feel how it speaks to my soul. I'm
mm,
absolutely loving it so far. I've only just started, but I'm
oh,
excited to
good.
to delve more into it and also to just be here with you and have this beautiful conversation. And really, I love how you shared your love for the creative practice and how that can really support us to come to that deep inner knowing and that inner wisdom and really connect us to the feminine and the divine. And I'm just excited to see where this takes us. But before I get ahead of
Thank you.
myself, I'll hand over to you. I'd love if you want to just introduce yourself and maybe share a bit about your journey and what led you here.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Well, thanks, Monique, for having me here. I'm really excited to be here. And so my name is Allie, and I found my way to creative practice through just my own sacred journey of initially it was really a spiritual journey of you know, uh, returning to return, trying to find that divine love that is within us and beyond us. And that journey then eventually just led me into my own creative work. And it's like I had been an artist early on, and I had gone to art school and that sort of a thing, but the art experience that I had had when I was younger was was a lot more focused on the technique, the end product, having a pretty picture made, and you know, there was something about coming to create creativity through the process and through really connecting with my creative practice through relationship with divine love and really kind of coming to creativity as, okay, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to really let this be a time for me to connect with my own divinity and see where that takes me. And again I would come to the page and have these aha moments and have these realizations. And I have to say, I didn't find this on my own. I mean, I took training, and I had the teacher Shiloh Sophia has been a big part of my journey to kind of guide me through this creative process. um but eventually I led myself back into ink and watercolors, which is what is in my book, is a lot of the ink and watercolors.
Mm. Oh, so amazing. Yeah, I really love the book and the different way that you bring your creative flair into that and really inviting us to come into that creativity. And yeah, what I've noticed within my own work is just that there's like a lot of that play has almost like disintegrated for so many of us. And it's kind
Yeah.
of just become like this kind of wake up, go through that autopilot day, like just kind of getting through the day is what I notice so many people struggling with is just like, and where's that aliveness gone? It's like, ugh, like I'm gonna do the same thing again. And it's just like, ugh. So yeah, it's been such a journey for me as well to find my own creativity and play as well, and like really coming back to my own aliveness.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, actually, well, you're reminding me of something because I know you have young children, right? You have one or two young children, and I when I had my sons are now older, but when they were really young, as a young mom, um I was very much in the routine of being a young mom, and very much in the schedule of what their little lives needed. And that was definitely a turning point for me, for my own for my own kind of sacred path, because that was something where I was going, oh, gosh, like today feels like yesterday and today feels like tomorrow. And there was something where I was like your that word aliveness. I wanted that aliveness. I wanted that zest. And I knew that this sacred was very much in the ordinary things, and yet I didn't know how to maybe seek it. And that was part of my journey that kind of then led me to study some of the mystics and stuff like that, because the mystical realm is the mystics are very much about being in your ordinary everyday and seeing where God is right there with you. And so that very much was a beginning place for me in connecting back with myself as creative. And I think, with children, they naturally have this ability to just be creative and to just be themselves and to have um just to be delightful and have a good time, and that just innate ability to play. And when I was a young mom, a lot of times I was pretty serious. So they were my teachers.
Yeah, I so relate to that. And I did a podcast recently, like a little while ago now, but it was all about play as medicine. And it was the same thing. Like I realized when my children came in, because yeah, I've got two, a little boy and a little girl, four
Mm.
years and 7 months. And when my boy came in, it was just like, wow, look how serious I am. And like play just felt so foreign to me. And it
Yeah.
did kind of like I guess I was blessed in the sense of I'm not here to do life in the kind of normal way. And like when people like, you got to have the routine and the napping like at the same time, like I'm
Yes.
not doing that. I like full rebel. And we went on the road from when my son was 7 weeks and we were like going to festivals and running workshops and like, I'm not doing the normal. But the second one comes in, you're like, I could really use some routine to support me. So it's like finding that balance of doing things a little differently where it feels really exciting and there's variety and there's alignment, but then also having that supportive structure and that routine that does create a bit of settledness. And I realized that more with like the second one and just kind of just before she came in, I was like, actually, I could really use some of that support. But yeah, for the first part, I was just like, no, we're gonna do like it very different.
Yeah,
But
well,
yeah,
and it's like, yeah, I mean, what you're speaking of speaks also so strongly to the energies of both the masculine and the feminine, because it's like the masculine is typically the structure and the feminine is more the, woo, we're just gonna flow, we're gonna be the river, we're just gonna go around. And it's so interesting how we can like look back at periods of our life and kind of see maybe where the teeter-totter was balancing was a little bit more one way or the other. And I, in my early days as a parent, I was much more like very very structured and got to do it this way.
yeah, it was really fascinating. I think is so what you're saying, like that kind of sometimes what I'm seeing is like that pendulum. So for most of my life, I was really in that kind of masculine, that push and like
Mhm.
trying to get the ducks in a row and trying to
Yep.
do all the right things. And then my son came in and it just kind of like it shifted so much for me. And it just felt so right. It just felt so aligned to start like putting the work out there and supporting others and going on the road as a family. And then when it
Yeah.
felt more aligned to have more of a settled environment and get our own place because we'd been living on the road for a few years and it was like now it's time to get our own
Yeah.
place and have a bit more of that. And so that's really what I'm an advocate for. It's like what actually feels aligned for you because it's different for each one of us how we want to do business and motherhood and relationships, it's going to look a
Yeah.
little different. And like that balance of masculine and feminine is going to be different. It's not about 50-50 and it's going
That's
to
right.
change with the different seasons of life and what's more needed in each part of your journey and your evolution.
It's yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. And I think for me, the creative practice is by returning for myself, diving in deeper into creative practice and letting that be a place where I really was um just relating with my own that inner sense of creativity as a spiritual way to connect, there was something very deep about that that did thread the feminine back in for me in a very positive way. You know, it was like, oh, I've been missing this whole thing for such a long time. And I've been so focused on structure, so focused on logic, and there's another way, or there's a balance here that can really help me and allow me to be playful, to be whimsical, to color outside of the lines. And so when I really kind of got back into my creativity, it was a lot of almost like breaking the rules. It was, for me, it was a safe place to break the rules because I didn't have to follow anybody's directions. I could just do what I wanted to do. And then through the guidance of Shiloh and through other um feminine teachers, you know, there was this teaching of, and now like look at the beliefs that you've been holding. Where did those beliefs come from? What needs to go, what needs to remain, and what needs to shift maybe into something that is a little bit more, healing, a little bit bringing you more into wholeness. And so
Yeah.
yeah, that's been a big part.
I love that. And I love that, like coloring outside of the lines. And if we can even just kind of broaden the way that we're like taking that in for anyone that's listening, it's like I read that actually in your book. And so we can maybe relate that to the art and the beautiful artwork that you've got in there, but also like how can we in life color outside of the lines? And I guess that's what it felt like when I was doing life differently. And
Yeah.
people were always like really inspired and in awe of what we were doing. Like we were traveling
Yeah.
from one end of the country to the other, and we were going for like 2, 3 months at a time. And I just had this mission to share the work and to support others on their journey and to show what's possible, even when you do have children in the
Yeah.
picture. And so it's like that invitation here for everyone listening. How can you start to color outside the lines? And I loved that piece around this was a safe place for me to do that. Because what I
Yeah.
notice is there's so much fear for people to start stepping out of the societal norms and what's kind of the right thing to do, rather than following what your heart is like singing and like screaming sometimes, like please just listen to me and let me kind of like start stepping out of the box. Because I work with a lot of women and especially mothers where there's just this kind of right way to do things, and
Yeah.
it just keeps us so stuck. And like coming back to that comment that we shared earlier around just every day kind of feeling like the same, where it's almost like I don't even want to get up today because it's just the same freaking thing.
Yeah. Right.
Mhm.
Oh,
Yeah.
I mean, it's I think it's fascinating when you start to really live in and lean into giving yourself permission to break some of those routines. And it's like I agree with you, like routine and structure can be so good and so helpful. And I mean, I myself am a person who likes to have kind of a rhythm for my day, but it's like I'll give you an example. One of my permissible parts for myself is that is just in creative practice. So it's like I do have a time every morning that like I wake and I have some kind of practice for myself, but it just doesn't look different every day. And when I was younger, it was like, you know, I was a person who was like, oh, there's a devotion book. I'm going to get up. I'm going to read this devotion book every day. And, you know, after like 4 days, I'd be like, this is so boring. And I would get grumpy about it. And, you know, but like I felt like, but this is what I'm supposed to be doing. This is what people tell me. I'm supposed to be reading a devotion. And
Yeah.
somehow this is supposed to be filling me up. But
Yeah.
it wasn't. And so to go, oh, actually, one day I can take a walk, and one day I can take photographs, and one day I can paint, and one day I can do some writing, and just like let it expand into what your own kind of heart and soul is calling you to do that day. Like that has just been, oh man, such
Mm.
freedom.
That's I'm such an advocate for that as well. And like we just spoke about just before we started this conversation about the manifesting generator in human design. Like we're both
Oh
Manny
yeah,
Gens and we need variety. It's we're not designed to be here and do the same thing every single day.
that's right.
It's like I'm so very much the same of like I would have everything structured. I was so like in my head and like this is how it had to be. This is I had to listen to the same kind of meditation every morning and I just had to like those ones where you're gonna listen to this every day for 30 days and I was like
Right.
day 4, I've had enough now. Or the same affirmation, just repeat, repeat, repeat. And I'm like
Right.
I'm bored. Like I need variety. So I'm such
Yes.
an advocate of like, yes, have that consistency of showing up for yourself every day, but allow that to be fluid and what actually feels good for me today. And I'm always asking or inviting my clients and students to really tune into like, what is going to most serve or support me in this moment or today, and let that look a little bit different. Even if you are someone that does like that consistency in the same thing, you might find that one day it's like, actually, I'm feeling really called to go over here or to go there or go to the beach or whatever it
Yeah.
might be, just to really
Yeah.
nourish your soul rather than like, oh, I would love to do that, but actually, I have to do X, Y, and Z. And you can just feel this like this kind of the soul being so sad. Like I would just really love to go and do this thing that's gonna light me up and let me play. But I have to be the good girl, good boy, and just go and do the thing. And it's just, oh, that poor little part of you that just wants to
Yes.
play.
Right. Uh, I'm totally with you. I mean, it is and it's funny how I think once you start tuning into it, you almost know immediately when you've said no to something where like you should have said yes. Or vice versa. Maybe you said yes to something and you go,
Yeah.
"Oh, why did I say yes to that?"
Yeah. Sometimes it feels good in the moment, like, yeah, that sounds like a great idea. And then like an hour later or even a minute later or the next day, you're like, actually. I'm not feeling that. And even coming back to human design, like the generator and manifesting generator strategy is wait to respond. But so often we're like,
Yes.
oh, that sounds great. Like jump in.
Yes.
Oh,
Oh my God.
actually. And then you feel obligated to follow through, even though it's like you realize it's actually not in alignment. So again, like let's color outside the lines and be like, you know what? I kind of jumped a little too quick. Let me just actually honor the fact that my body's a no for this. And knowing in that, it's actually of the greatest service for that person as well, even though it might feel a little bit shitty that you said yes and then you're backing out. But in
Yeah.
honoring yourself, you're letting others know that it's actually safe and safe for them to do that too. So we become the walking permission
Yeah.
slip.
I mean, it's like I mean, I know that there have been times when I've said yes to things and then I go back and I say, actually, this is just not going to work for me. And there is like that little tinge of guilt for going back to the person and saying no. But, but like it's what you're saying. It's in greater service, I feel, in modeling. What does it really look like to honor your own inner authority and to say, this isn't, if I do this thing, then I'm not really being true to who I am and myself in this moment. Maybe a year down the line, my answer would be completely different, but for right now,
Mm.
it is what it is. So,
Yeah. And I feel like the more of us that do that, it just creates more and more safety in the collective energy for people
yeah.
to actually start stepping into that because there's still so much fear about self-honoring and there's so much like reward or kind of praise around self-sacrifice and selflessness
Oh
or
gosh.
there's a lot of shaming around being selfish and we so desperately want to fit in and be loved and be accepted. And there's such heavy conditioning from such a young age that self-sacrifice is the way to be, especially as like a woman. And speaking from
Yeah.
my own experience as well, I so feel that, and I can still feel that element of guilt or that fear or that stickiness around having those confronting conversations. But the more
Yeah.
that we start to lean into that and practice it, it does get easier. And you actually start to see that so many people are so happy and like, yeah, totally get it. And I've definitely noticed this, like even being a mom, in like honoring myself, people are more than happy to be like, yeah, no worries, like we totally get it. And it's
Yeah.
like a relief, like, ah, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. No, absolutely. It's I everything you're saying is resonating in my experience for sure.
Mm. So I'm wondering if you have anything to share about like someone that might still be kind of feeling a bit stuck in the logical kind of this is the way, the routine, more of like that kind of masculine, but it's almost like in that kind of unhealthy masculine because you're kind of like really tense, you're really like stuck in your ways, but you're like so desiring to color outside the lines and move into creative expression. But like, where do I even start?
Yeah, it's like there's so many like layers here because it's like first what you were just saying kind of about that whole self-sacrifice and kind of like laying our lives down for everyone else and ignoring our own needs or our own kind of soul desire. I mean I hear that as well in the work that I do with women, with mainly women. And I would just say, with there is something I feel like about um that is wrapped up with our beliefs around creativity, because it's like a lot of times we have these beliefs around creativity, whether it's we've been told that it's a hobby. It's not really worth as much as other kinds of professions, or or it's not worth taking the time for. It's a luxury that you have to. And that I it's a luxury is one that is very personal to me because it used to be very much like the last thing I would give myself was creative time. It was like I had the checklist of all the things I had to do and before I could say, okay, I'm gonna now go and take 10 or 15 minutes to write or a half an hour to do some artwork. And so there's something very much, I think, that unleashing our own creative power on the page starts to also, unleash the beliefs around the self-sacrifice. And it also starts to kind of loosen up that if we tend to be people who are very rigid and structured, and a lot of times I work with women who are self-proclaimed perfectionists, right? And it's like, creativity is such a thing where we've been taught that something has to look perfect in order for it to be valued. Oh my gosh. It's like it's so painful, right? So a lot of the way that when I work with people, it's very much about, can we release what it has to look like, what we're told it's supposed to look like? Can we release that it has to be any sort of perfect? And it's like when people say, well, I want to know, how do how do you paint a certain way, or how do you draw a certain way? I just think, well, there's a lot of videos online that if you really want to look up all the technical ways of how to draw an eyeball, you probably can find a video on that, but that's not what we're here to do. We're here to like unravel all of that for you so that you can loosen up that structure a little bit and to go, and it's amazing how sometimes just a blank page, people will open to it and they're afraid of it. They're just afraid to put even a mark down. And so just releasing a line and letting yourself doodle and be playful about it can be just such a great way to begin, I think.
Yeah, I so relate to that, and actually, it's quite funny because I also have really related with the label of perfectionist. It's funny because it actually shows up in my chart as well with human design, like this kind of desire to be perfect, and like I'm a 5/1 profile, so it's like investigating and researching and
That's me
studying.
too. I'm a 5'1" too.
So good. No wonder why like we're like
Yeah,
harmonizing. But yeah, like that kind of investigating and studying so that I can be perfect or the expert or like there was so
yeah,
fear to put myself out there and speak about what I was learning because I was like, do I know enough yet? Am I going to be challenged and like kind of told that what I'm saying is wrong? And so there was so much fear around actually putting myself out there, and writing always came more naturally to me. That was like where I guess my safety began. Of like, this is where I can color outside the lines in a
Yeah.
safe way. But the thought of like putting kind of pencil to paper and actually drawing something was always terrifying for me. And I've
Yeah.
had times where I have done that, but it's not like a regular practice. And it's just kind of bringing that up of like that kind of thought of like the eyes have to be perfectly symmetrical and it has to look like this or it's not really good. Or I would have some drawings. I'm like, I'd be afraid that my partner's gonna find them and look at them and judge me because he's a
Right.
natural.
Well,
And he picks up any kind of creative thing, paint, drawing, like
yeah.
instrument, and he just like boom gets it. But for
Yeah.
me, it's actually like even the thought of picking up an instrument, I have such a desire to play different instruments, but getting it wrong, like that learning
Yeah.
process, which is so fascinating, how much I've overcome in that area, but there's still elements and threads of like I really want to learn how to do the acoustic guitar so that I can start singing and making my own music. But then, like, what will people think? Like, what if my voice isn't perfect? Like, it's so
Oh,
fascinating.
oh my gosh. What will people think? I know. I know that is
Yeah, like
that is
if
it
I'm
is.
out of tune, I won't be loved. Like, where do these things come from?
Oh my gosh. It's really it's interesting that you're saying that because it's like I know that there have been times that I have caught myself not wanting to participate in things because I know that I'm going to maybe look foolish doing it. I'm not going to look proficient at doing it. And that's such an uncomfortable space and place to be. It's to be out of your element, and it's just very vulnerable. It is
Yeah,
very vulnerable. And
yeah,
even like back in the day, like I started my a blog like 9 or 10 years ago. I don't have it anymore, but like that was kind of where my journey began. And it was like I remember every
me
time
too.
I would post, oh my gosh, like it was like publish, I would be scared to press the publish button. And not only that, but it's like there were certain posts that like it would take me so long to get it the way that I wanted it to be in order to publish it. And it's so interesting because um a lot of that has loosened up for me over practicing, right? Like you just have to keep showing up to the practice of going, okay, it doesn't have to be exactly perfect. My language doesn't have to, I don't have to get it right it's like just what is that anyways? Getting it right.
Yeah,
Can any of us get it right?
I know. It's like, what even is right? We tend to be so stuck in this kind of paradigm of right, wrong, good, bad, but it actually doesn't even exist. It's just like essentially an illusion. Like what
Yeah.
even is right and wrong? And it's funny because I actually like my journey began with my blog post as well, or at least like when I started to put myself out there and started to really share my creativity. And I was actually just reflecting on it this morning with my partner, and I was like, I remember like it must have been probably around the same amount of time, like almost a decade ago when I began my blog, and I still have my
Yeah.
blog. Um, but yeah, I'd be like at the cafe writing, like just in flow, and I'm like, I've got 5 subscribers, and I'm like, one day someone might actually read what I write. And I was so excited about it, but that's where it began, where it was like, this is my little corner of the internet where
Yeah.
I just get to share what I'm learning and what's moving through me. And that's expanded over time, but definitely resonate with like, yeah, wanting it to be perfect and that fear of like, oh my gosh, someone could actually read this and like,
Yeah.
what are they gonna think? Um, but yeah, like it just kind of, there was a particular word that it's kind of floated away, but just this feeling of like how kind of hidden so many of us keep ourselves because of this fear of
Mm,
like what someone else is going to think. And then it really
yeah.
like just shuts down that aliveness that we were speaking about earlier of like,
Yeah.
oh, like what if we were to just kind of get to the end of our life and it's like we cared so much about what someone else thought when they probably actually don't even give a shit. Like when you really
Right,
think about it, like they
exactly.
actually just so they're probably just as afraid as you are. that they're also kind of just so focused on what they're doing that they actually don't even know what you're doing. But we're so afraid of like, what are they going to say? What are they going to think? Am I going to be loved, accepted, and belong? And there's so much fear that we just kind of stay in the norm and in this kind of like shut down version of ourselves, really tense, stuck in that routine, stuck in that structure. And I'm all for having structure, but the structure that actually aligns for you, that's the difference. I think so
Yeah.
many people stuck in structures that actually someone else created that isn't actually of the greatest service.
It's yeah, it's such a great point. I mean, it's like for me, the greatest structure I can create for myself is a structure that allows me to honor my creative time, my create it's like and I can recognize when that structure is kind of unhinged upon, I start to feel ungrounded. I'm like, oh my gosh, like what's like how I start to grasp for it because I'm like my my rhythm of my of maybe how I go about honoring that creative self, if it starts to get shaky with the structure, then I know I have to somehow find my way back to it. I have to and I think you were recently, just like in one of your recent podcasts, we're talking about how 5 minutes can just like change everything. It just can return you back to yourself. And it's like that honestly is just a little um it it's just not even necessarily a mantra, but it's something like I really subscribe to is 5 minutes. Like 5 minutes can be 5 minutes of just closing your eyes and being intentional about your breath, 5 minutes of doodling, 5 minutes, a 5 minute walk, 5 minute nap. I mean, any of those things, it's just like, it's amazing how it can just kind of recenter yourself and to go, okay, like, and now moving forward.
Yeah, and I think that's where we can get so overwhelmed is thinking that it has to be more than 5 minutes. Like, if we think I've got
Yeah.
to meditate for an hour, I've got to go to the gym for an hour, I've got to do all
Yeah.
these things, it's like there's only so many hours in the day. And if you are a parent as well, and you like,
Yeah.
or you're running a business, or you've got different, like, we've all got something, like, whether like it's those things or not, we've all got a lot on our plate. And it's like the thought of having to do something for so long, and even just kind of as soon as it feels too much we don't want to do it and we experience things like procrastination and just put it off. But if like
Yeah.
sometimes it's just if we can give ourselves like only has to be 5 minutes. Like some like for the example with the gym, I know that's something that a lot of people struggle with, like it's like physical exercise, going for a walk. We think it has to be a certain amount of time and we're like, oh, I don't really want to go for a whole hour. Like, and then we just don't go at
Right.
all. But I just tell myself like it only needs to be like 20 minutes. Like I can go for 20
Yeah.
minutes or five or whatever it is. And then usually we start to feel like the happy hormones coming on and we start to feel really good. Like we really get
Yeah.
lost in the doodling, we get lost in the writing. Like I remember with my blog post, I'd go to the cafe. I loved writing at the cafe. And it makes a lot of sense now that I understand my human design of like being in that public aura. But as I would like struggle sometimes like looking at the blank page, like what do I even write about? Like where do I even begin? And as soon as I kind of just started, I would just get into this flow state and I would lose myself, and all of a sudden I'd have an entire thing. And I'm like, wow, that actually came through once I just started. Like, I put pen to paper, like
Yeah.
journaling practice. As soon as I was like, with my journaling, I would write, I don't know what to write. And then all of a sudden it would open up the like gateway and all this stuff would come through. And I'm like, wow, I just wrote 3 pages. But I didn't
Yeah.
intend to write 3 pages. I just was like, I'm just gonna write. I actually just don't even know where to start right now. Or I'm feeling sad right now. Or you know what? I'm grateful that I have a roof over my head. And then more
Yeah.
things would start to come through. So it's like, how can we just start to get started? Like just put that pen to paper, just 5 minutes, just some deep breaths.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so I always find it like so interesting how um just by making room, by making space and showing up to even five, to for 3 minutes to 5 minutes and just really being in consideration of like what is on my heart right in this moment? What am I present to? What do I care about? And to give yourself that space to write. And it's like that in some ways is how my book formed, was because I didn't really set out thinking I'm going to write a book, but it was in the return of showing up again to write again and again that all of a sudden it's like the same themes kept showing up. And I think that that too, it becomes a record for yourself when you show up on a regular basis to something that is really tangible, whether it's your own writing or your own, even like with the visuals, it's like, you know, if you decided that you were gonna, really just sit down and create a visual throughout the year, even if it was just once a month throughout the year, I bet after, having 12 visuals in front of you, somehow you would see the common thread through all of them. And that's I think that that can really then become information for who we are, for what we're really dealing with in our own lives. And then if we have that bravery to share it in the world, if we in it, maybe it's not on a blog, right? It doesn't have to be on a big platform, but even just with another friend to say, I've been writing this and I just need witness on this. I need somebody to listen to it. It starts to create just such a deeper connection with with the wider world, because you start to recognize that all of us have these common stories and common threads. And I think that that's what heals the divide. I mean, it's like our world sometimes feels so divided, but it's like if we can sit in connection with one another, sit in creation with one another, and be able to have those sharing spaces and places, we realize none of us are that different from one another.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so fascinating because I was just going through some of the non-violent communication work, and it was really interesting because it's like we all have at the core the same needs, and we just have like a different strategy of trying to get those needs met. But when it comes to it, we're like clashing and triggered by each other and lashing out and all this stuff. And when it comes down to it, we actually all just have these same needs. And yeah, there's just been such a divide and there's been such isolation and this kind of feeling like I've got to be X, Y, and Z. I've got to be this way. I've got to be that way. It's not okay for me to be this. But so many of us are just craving that freedom just to be ourselves
Yeah,
and to walk our own path. And so I just feel like the more of us that take those steps, it just opens up the the pathway and the permission for more of us
yeah.
to really give that to ourselves and start taking those steps.
Mm.
For me, it's like even the thought of, because for the longest time I've wanted to write my own book, and I find I keep connecting with more and more people that have written books. I'm like, I'm getting these little nudges, but it was so funny because what stopped me was like, I have to have like this perfect kind of environment or time where I can just take a few months out of everything just to write my book rather than actually just doing little bit by little bit. And I was
Yeah,
like, the thought of writing an entire book in one go felt so overwhelming. And then as I've been kind of working on my ebooks and refining them, I'm like, oh, I can see actually how this is building up to be my book. Like,
yeah,
and then it was just this light bulb, like, oh, I don't have to write it all in one go. And so I've released like the second version of my regular ebook. I've released like the Authentically You ebook. And I can also see how these are like weaving together and expanding over time to become this beautiful physical book that will come to fruition in
yes,
its own divine timing. And it was just this massive relief, like, oh, like I can just actually follow that path as it unfolds. Like I don't need to force it. I don't need to like schedule it
right.
in. I can when it feels aligned to do that. But again, it's just for me that tuning in, coming back to that inner wisdom of what feels right for me in each moment.
Yeah, yeah. Well, absolutely. And I think, going back to the manifesting generator, I think like for myself, it's like there are periods of my life where I feel like I have, stokes and all these different fires. It's just kind of like, oh, I'm doing this, and it's like because of that variety, sometimes I think it's hard to clear your schedule, right, for months at a time and go, I'm gonna really sit down and just like create a book. But it's like I think that by regularly just kind of tending to the fires that are really juicing you up in the moment can, it's like if you just keep tending them, eventually there comes that point when you go, okay, I'm gonna really sit down and take the time to put all of this stuff together and do the other work around it that has to happen in particular for a book.
Yeah. I found some things that really supported me in like coming more into my creative flow was really like practicing the art of surrender and like
Mm,
really just being in, okay, like same with what we were talking about with the morning practice, like what feels good for me to do today. It's kind of the same like in business and family and relationship, like what actually feels really good and supportive for me to do today rather than like these are all the things that I have to do. And often we put way too much on our plate and try to get so much done in one go. What I've actually just felt into is I'll put the things there, like these are the things that are on my mind that feel alive for me. And then just kind of taking that time each day to tune in, what actually feels like this is where my energy's at. This is what actually feels really alive. Because that's when things actually flow much easier. It actually has a lot more aliveness in it. Whereas if I'm
yeah.
forcing myself to do, say, social media or like content or something where it just doesn't really feel alive, there is a way to work with that in the sense like maybe I can tap into like what am I really feeling and how can I speak from that place. But sometimes it's like actually it doesn't feel supportive for me to go into that particular task today, but actually this
Yeah.
is where my energy's at. And so that's where I've really learnt to find my flow in business, but also in family.
Mm,
Like sometimes playing in a certain way with my son doesn't feel alive for me in that moment. So how can I access play that feels really supportive and nourishing where we're both going to
mm.
enjoy it rather than him feeling that I really don't want to play and they can feel that and you're just like doing it from obligation, which never feels good. So it's like, okay, I would really love to go for a walk. Would you like to go for a walk? And how can we actually just start to do more of what feels really good for us and also good for them? Or in
Right.
relationship, it's like, you know what? I don't feel like having sex right now, but can I have like some other kind of connection? And like, is there something else that feels really alive that is both like nourishing for both of you? So again, like rather
Absolutely.
than leading from obligation and what we think we should do because we're a partner, a business owner, a mother, a
Oh
father,
my gosh.
whatever it is.
Yeah, I mean you're tapping into all of it, right? Because it's like it's just it's a thread that ends up leading into every aspect of your life. I mean, it leads into your finances and how you're spending your money. It leads into how you're eating and what you're putting in your body. I mean, just everything starts to that question of aliveness and where what are the choices I'm making that really support that aliveness and what are the choices that really put a impingement on it. And I
Yeah.
think that it's that too. We just have to be gentle with ourselves. I find that for myself I really have to be gentle with myself because it's we're human, so it's like it's easy to also go into old patterns. It's easy to just almost go the easier route, which is a lot of times the thing that's not supporting us so well.
Oh, it's so funny that you bring that up because yeah, like recently, I even noticed like a pattern within my relationship with my partner where we were both just defaulting to what seemed easier. And even though it
Yeah,
was like easier in the moment, it actually was creating long-term pain. So it was like actually it
yeah,
wasn't of service. It might just be kind of easier just to kind of get on and do things the same way. But it was preventing us from having the relationship and the family and the life that we really desired to have. And so, yeah, it's kind of like easier in the moment, but then long term, we look back and it's like, well, we're not really moving toward the kind of life and that relationship that we really see for ourselves. And so, is it
yeah.
really easier when you think of it that way? And so often it's the same with like, it's just easier to go down that normal pathway that's kind of
That's
been laid
right.
out. It's just easier not to have the conversation and just to keep the peace. But
Yeah,
then how much peace are we actually creating in that because we're not feeling inner peace because we're going against what's really true for us. And then
Right.
we're like really encouraging patterns and ways of being that aren't really serving us or each other or the collective. And so it's actually just continuing patterns of that aren't really creating peace within our lives and within the world.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love that that the long vision, right? Is like what I almost hear you saying is you're thinking about that longer, just the committing to something that is might not be easier in the moment, but it creates ease as you carry on in the path of life.
Yeah, and that's what I do a lot within my own work when I'm working with clients is like, well, where are we going? Like, what is that big vision? Because that's actually what's going to support us in like what are the things that are preventing us from getting there or moving toward there. And it also gives you that inspiration of like, yes, this is uncomfortable to feel, this is uncomfortable to express, this is uncomfortable to address, but I know why I'm doing it. It's in service of that greater vision, which actually is
Yeah.
in not just service of ourselves, but of our family, our relationships, and of everyone. And it's really just giving that
Yeah.
permission slip again for others to do the same. I'm curious for you personally, when was that shift for you? So you mentioned like earlier on, there was like more of that kind of
Yeah.
structure and routine, and then there was more of this shift into like coloring outside the lines. And I'm wondering like how that kind of unfolded for you.
Yeah. I would say it unfolded for me when really, I mean, when I started working with Shiloh, because that the coursework that I took with her was her Color of Woman program, and that is an intense program. I mean, it's like a year long, like you're creating like 5 or 7 canvases, and they're like these big canvases, and you're diving deep into your story, right? So it's just like you're unraveling just kind of like all, just different aspects of you're working on different aspects of things that you hold within you. And so that was really the beginning of going, oh my gosh, like I've been operating this way and this has not really been helping me in my life. And so it was loosening up. And I think that there's something about the visual, um and that's where for me the visual is just so imperative. Like it's like the visuals that we have inside of us when we get access to them and put them on the page, it's like they inform so much about our own stories and our own lives when we allow them to kind of come forth. And uh, it was in, for me, seeing these faces come to the canvas and knowing that they were created with a deep level of intention, a deep level of soul, thread through that this wasn't just creating a portrait, right? Like this was really at a deep level going, oh, what is the conversation that is asking to be had from this experience? Um and now the way that I work, and so it was like um that really supported me for a good period of time until I really found my way back with my watercolors, because I don't know, I love the flow of watercolor. I love the surprise that can happen when you start to spread 2 colors next to each other, and there's just something very delightful for me about that medium. And so I just, that too uh, allowed me a space to really be free on the page. And I mean, part of the way that I create my drawings, not all of the drawings in my book, but a lot of them is just with us, I really start just with a free flowing line. And I like to say that that line, it's definitely not a scribble, and it's not really even a doodle line. It's like I really come to the page with this inquiry of like, what wants to show up today? Like, where is love going to meet me today? And like, let that line unfurl. And I already know that I like to create characters, people or animals, like, and so I'm always kind of looking for like, oh, where could I maybe put a face? Where, what, what does she want to speak to me today? And and then it just kind of evolves from that space. And so the way that I enter into my own creativity is through kind of that curiosity and through surprise. And I think that those elements have really helped me to loosen up the structure because I'm a former person who used to say, I want to draw a picture of an animal and I'm going to go online and I'm going to look up a picture of an animal and then I'm going to try to make the picture look like that animal. And then I'd get frustrated because it never looked that way. And
Yeah.
I mean, that whole method has been thrown out the window. And now I'm just like, oh, like this little creature wanted to show up. I don't, it doesn't even look like an animal, but maybe it's a fairy or something.
Yeah, and it creates so much space for imagination and for others to have their experience in your work. Like, what are they
Yeah.
seeing? What are they receiving from that? Because there is a bit more of like that abstract of like I love what you were sharing about the conversation. Like, even in that, it's like, well, as I'm reading your book or looking at the images, like, what wants to show up for me
Yeah.
in this? And there's so much
Yeah.
space for that.
Ah, yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah. And it's like that's how I hope people engage the book is especially with the visuals, to look at it, to look at the visuals and to really be with them and to say, what is this speaking to me
Mm.
for myself? And if I was going to write a poem, meaning you, if you were going to write a poem, what would your poem say about one of those pieces of artwork? Because a
Yeah.
lot of times the artwork does go with the poetry in this book. So it's kind of like some of the visuals have poems, others don't, but it's like that you can sometimes match which ones go together.
Yeah. And I'm such an advocate as well for working with mentors and guides and having
Yeah.
a container to hold you, especially a long-term container, because there's such a thing around the quick fix, the magic pill that like how can I get there the fastest? But it's like we realize that there's actually nowhere to get. There's actually not really a destination because as soon as you get to wherever it is that you're wanting to get or you receive the thing you're wanting to receive, there's just going to be another thing. So it's just
Yeah.
really that journey. And I think when you have that 12-month or longer container to really be held, that's where you actually get to go into the really deep layers because you're going to meet points where you feel more resistance and there's like
Yeah.
these growing pains and there's like, oh, like this is really uncomfortable. And there's that real invitation to lean into that. And there's really like that container that's holding you. So it's like that masculine container that really
Yes.
allows you to create that safety to lean in, to go deeper, to go deeper. Like, what else is here? What else is here? And it's fascinating because I also was recently in a 12-month container, which really, when I think about it, it's probably much longer than that. But it was a 12-month program with Layla Martin, and that was like a tantric approach to sex, love, and relationships. And it
Mhm.
was all about like embodiment work and just like leaning in a little bit more and leaning in a little bit more. And it's intense to be in a container for that
Yeah,
length of
it
time, but
is.
that's
Yes.
where the deep, deep work happens because you're really committed. Even if you need to like take a moment and you kind of take
Yeah.
that pause, you do what you need to do. But there's that container that keeps inviting you to go deeper. What else is here? What else wants to be met? So I'm such an advocate for that and just seeing like what is here. I love the inquiry that you shared around like, what wants to meet me today? How does love want to flow through me today?
Yeah, well, and it's like I look because I did that coursework back in 2018 and it's just incredible. Like I look back on that year of my life and I'm like, wow, that was just it was such a cocoon time for me because I almost couldn't even talk about it with people because in some ways I didn't even understand it myself, right? Like I just had kind of like thrown myself into it because it was one of those like deep
Mm.
yeses within that I'm like, I'm doing this. And then to be in it for that period of time, I almost didn't have words around it. As everything just felt like it was shifting and opening And then, that community really was such a support for a good period of time for me. And and sometimes it's like I also then think it's time to fly on and carry on, right? And so
Yeah.
it's like I carry that community in my heart so much. And it's like I still drop in occasionally, but it's like I just felt like it was exactly what I needed for this period of time. And then I think it is also okay to give yourself permission to, like, okay, now what new thing might be unfolding and where do I need to keep flowing? And I think that sometimes that too can be difficult to give ourselves when we have really invested in community and invested in something, to then also give ourselves permission to go, I and I'm going to keep flowing on.
Yeah, totally. And it's so true. Like these experiences for me, they're like medicine journeys, and it takes time to integrate them.
Yeah.
There's so much different kind of medicine that we can work with, and like art is definitely one of them. And art comes in many different flavors and different forms. And so I
Yeah.
feel like it's, yeah, just starting to feel into where which one kind of calls to you? What style of art? Like, is it doodling? Is it drawing? Is it painting? Is it writing? Like, what is it for you? Because it looks so different for everyone. And again, there's no right or wrong way to do it. It's just what's calling you.
Oh, absolutely. And then I think that the bigger umbrella of creativity is to move beyond it as a specific activity, and really to see that your whole life is the creation,
Yeah.
and that the choices that you're making every day have this opportunity for the creative flow to go through it. And by just honoring maybe some kind of practice for yourself, whether it's song, dance, breath work, I mean, all of these creative outlets that we have, I think that then supports us to see the bigger thing as this, like, awesome creative thing experience that we are moving through from day to day.
Yeah. Oh, hmm. I'm curious as well. When you started to have like these shifts, so you went through this 12-month experience and you started to like more like your creative practice started to come in more. How did that kind of impact different areas of your life?
Oh gosh. Well, I mean, it's interesting. I would say that probably my family life, my family, my husband and my two kids were definitely the people that saw it the most, and I would say that shifted the most within our own kind of little family structure, because I was like saying I have to go paint. I have to go downstairs and paint. It is like I had to make room. I mean, I was committed, and it was like I was like, I'm doing this. And so there were a lot of evenings when I would paint, or there would be a lot of weekends when I was really spending time. So there was this shift in how things had operated, right? Because I typically had been primary caretaker, and all of a sudden I was saying, things need to shift here, because I need you to really kind of step in to watch the kids, or to that sort of that whole that I would say that was a big, because my kids were young. I mean, now they're in their late teens, but back, I mean, it was like 8 years ago. So 6 years, yeah, 6, 7 years ago. So they were like 10 and 8, I think, when I started my journey, my getting back to myself as an artist. But they were so, like, they loved seeing, my kids loved seeing what I was creating. They would love to come into my space and just kind of like be like, whoa, like what is mom doing?
Yeah, and how much would that like impact them on their journey of like creativity and honoring themselves and their process and their needs, and like it just opens up a whole new world.
Yeah, I mean, and it's like I would say like another thing that just has shifted that shifted along the way was where I was putting my creative energies, right? Because it's like there was a period of time where it's like I have been a creative person for a long time, but it was like maybe I was putting my creative energies in things that maybe didn't need as much of my time. And, I mean, things like, it's like I would be the mom who would like make really special cupcakes to bring to like a class party or something like
Yeah.
that. It's like that's beautiful, right? And it's like if that's where you can do it there. And also when I really started to come back to myself and really just take it seriously for myself, I was like, oh, that same energy that I am spending doing this thing over here, I can actually channel it a different way, and really it becomes about something greater and more like potent for my life. It was more like coming back to tend my own creative fire in a way. I don't know if that makes
Yeah,
any
yeah,
sense, but
definitely. I'm wondering as well, like, did you notice any kind of challenges or struggles when you first started to say, like, hey, actually, I need to go and do this
oh
now?
my gosh. Yeah,
How did you navigate them
absolutely.
as well?
Oh my gosh, absolutely. Yeah, I think it was definitely I mean my husband and I definitely had arguments over it. I'm sure of it. I'm sure we were but at the same time, I mean he's always been my husband's been always been super supportive of the trail that I have that this path that I've been on, but those conversations around um needing time and space. I think it's about like having your voice and about saying like this matters, this matters for me, and this really is important, and and I'm not going to back down from it for myself. And it this is something that um I feel is really it becomes really important to when we start to rethread with our own inner wisdom and our own inner voice, because there does come a time when we have to then um speak up for what our needs. And I would say that that would be the thing that over these last over these last years is like naming more and more of my needs and getting clear on what those needs are and kind of doubling down on it.
Yeah, I love that. I can so relate, and it makes so much sense as well. Like when we are making these big shifts, like I notice people that I work with, like we tend to work together for like 6 to 12 months and beyond. And like yeah, there are going to be some uncomfortable conversations to have, and there is some shifting of like what was familiar, what was like the way that we were and who we were, and that all starts to kind of unravel and change. And it can be quite scary for people. Like, you're changing. What does this mean for me? How is this going to impact me? Like, of
Yeah.
course, it's going to be a little triggering. It's going to be a little uncomfortable. It's like, well, I'm so used to it being this way. And we create such a safety in the known, in the familiar. And now, like, there's all these things that are out of our control. Like, now my partner or my mother or whoever is like, they're changing in a big way. This is like gonna be a little bit unnerving for the nervous system. And so it's just
Yeah.
being mindful of that. It's not about backing down, but how can we support everyone in that process of transition?
Absolutely. I mean, it's I think it is a it it takes a lot for myself. I tend to be I love to have conversation and communication. So it's like in my more intimate relationships, it's really about kind of digging into those conversations and um both being able to speak, but also really hearing from the other person and hearing their needs and hearing what is this. And even like the method of of circle. So that was another kind of training that I went through, was like red thread circle training. And the red thread circle is just like one of the most magical things that we need on our planet right now, because the circle, um any kind of like circle teaching is about listening to the stories around the circle and being able to hear from every voice, and
Mhm.
to honor all voices as being in equity to one another, and to really uplift that community feel and the belonging, that everybody belongs and that all voices belong in that circle. And so, and that you have, for the red thread, it's like you cut your piece. And so you have your piece that is yours to tend, so that you don't have to always carry the whole, right? It's like, it's not
Mm,
your job to carry the whole, but you have your piece. That has been very important, like with my family, that teaching, because I think that that is a teaching that we all kind of use that language
mm,
for
yeah,
in our family life
yeah,
around what is our piece, and even just like honoring the children's
yeah,
perspectives as being as equal as adults, because
yeah.
so often children's voices get drowned out.
Yeah. How can we create space for more, like for all of us to be heard and for all of us to have this space to be creative, to be free, to walk our
Yeah,
own path rather than like leading from obligation and this is who I should be or what I should be doing. Yeah.
absolutely.
And it
Yeah.
feels like this creative practice would be so supportive. It definitely is for me. But whatever that might be, because sometimes it's like, what I might notice coming up is like, what's the point? Like, this is not being productive because it's like
Oh,
there's so much glorification around being productive and getting shit done rather than
yeah.
actually, how does this serve me to be more efficient in getting things done? Because now my cup is full.
Yes. Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. I mean,
And
I think that's the whole point, right? It's like that's for me the work, when I work with women, is like, when you take your time for yourself and you really deeply listen to your own inner heart space, it's like you then have so much energy to then go out into the different facets of your life, and to be able to share with who needs to be shared with,
yeah.
because you're coming at it from just a really, with a full well of
Yeah.
love.
Yeah, I hear so often like women saying to me like I feel like I've got my time back because it's like
Mm.
how am I getting like I'm getting the same things done but all of a sudden I just have more time and it's like well we didn't get more time in the day it's just that because your cup is so full and you're like really living in alignment you've got more energy you work more efficiently and it's like all of a sudden you've got your time back and like that's something that we don't act like that's such a valuable resource. It's like when you spend your time, when you invest your time in things, you don't get that back in the sense of like once you've used that time, you've used it. Whereas a lot of like other resources we might kind of feel really scarce around, like money is like always replenishable, but once you've used your time, the day's kind of complete. So, how can we get more of our time back and do more of what actually fills our cup and what feels really nourishing and that really lights us up and where we feel really, really alive?
Oh yeah, and it's like, I also think like you also start to realize what can go, right? Like you also realize
Delete,
like,
delegate.
right. Well, and it's like, I think that that too is such a huge part of it, is because it's like when you really start to tend but that inner world of yourself, you start to go, oh, I have been giving energy to this and this, and why? It's not really stuff that I even need to be, or or like you said, efficiency. It's like you start to just do it a little bit different, a little smarter, a little more efficient, and then you do end up having more time to be able to uh focus on practice.
Yeah, what actually lights you up, whether that's family, that's creative practice. And then I also find like sometimes getting started can be a little bit challenging, but then once you start to like reap the benefits of it and you realize how powerfully beneficial this is, not just for you, but those around you, we just naturally want to do more of it. And then those
Yeah.
around us start to see how much it's benefiting. They're like, you should maybe go and do that thing that you love to
Yeah,
do.
exactly. That's true. It's like,
Uh,
Allie, why don't you go take 30 minutes and reset yourself? Okay, I will.
yeah, we're less like short fused and short tempered and like frustrated or angry or like snippy. And it's like, wow, you're so much more enjoyable to be around.
It will exactly. And it's like I think that I think that that's something that I can see in myself is that I'm still the same person in many ways, but I think I'm I'm more even keeled. I have less anxiety and I'm not as reactive as I used to be. You know, it's like when things used to really get under my skin, it would be like I would be totally reactive. And now I operate just in a different, in a more reflective and slower responding, you know, slower to respond. And I think that that has come from just continuing to show up to the work.
Mm, beautiful. Thank you so much. It's been such an amazing conversation.
Oh
I'm
my gosh, it's been
curious.
great.
I'm curious if like if you would be open to sharing something from your book for us.
Oh my gosh, I would love to. And I had one picked out, so let me see if I can oh yeah, I think I would love to read this poem called No Time to Lose. And um it's on page 25. It says, "The water draws me to her edge. There I am to soothe the sting. I look in the abyss for a sign. Tranquil hush stares back at me. What do you see? Says the sea. The truth is, it's only me. Then I hear, love all of her. I dive into uncharted waters, make a wave or two or three. The next day I return and plunge again and again. Days turn to months, turn to seasons, turn to years. I learn to love the me I see, all of her, splash and soul. This practice of submerging and emerging has me soaking wet and amused. Droplets drip and urge, share the good news. I reach to the masses, open hands and heart true. There's no time to lose. Love all of you.
Mm, I love it. Thank you so much. Uh,
Thank you so much for having me. It's just been a delight to be with you, and I feel like so simpatico with so many things that you shared. So it's been great to be together.
yeah, and thank you. I feel like there's so much here to share with our community, and yeah, what a gift, and that we've synchronistically aligned from across the globe. Um, I'd love if you'd share just where people can find you, and
Yeah.
what you currently have on offer, and how people could potentially work with you.
Yeah, so I my website is soulkindling.com, so the same name as my book. And my focus with people, I do one-on-one sessions of I just call them spark sessions, and it's really just a way to kind of get present and kind of open up yourself creatively on the page. And every time I meet with somebody, it's like a new adventure. I never really know where we're gonna go that day. So it's a little surprising and fun. So that's my one-on-one work. And then I'm starting a community based on my prayer squares practice. And so prayer squares is a really simple kind of four-step prayerful visual prayer practice. And so it's mostly just going to be a community who are looking to for people who are looking to kind of dive into their prayer life in a visual way. So it doesn't have to be the way that I create. Maybe they're, you know, Zentanglers or something, but just it's just a way to be together in visual community. So That's all. And I'm on Instagram at Soul Kindling, so you can follow me there too.
Beautiful. I'll pop all those links below. That sounds absolutely divine. I highly recommend the Soul Kindling book. I've just started it, like I said, and it's just absolutely beautiful. My son loves the pictures and he's like,
Oh, good.
I'm like going to turn the page. He's like, I'm not finished looking at the picture yet.
I love that. Ah, thank you. Thank you for saying that. I love
Oh,
that.
you're so welcome. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you, Monique. I've loved being with you. It's been awesome.